You think you're tough? You survived 2020, you've dealt with slow Wi-Fi, you've eaten gas station sushi and lived to tell the tale. But here's the thing, you wouldn't last a single day in medieval times. Not even close. Not even if you had a head start and a detailed survival guide. I'm not talking about the obvious stuff like no Netflix or indoor plumbing. I'm talking about the fact that within your first 24 hours, you'd probably be dead, dying, or desperately wishing you were never born. Think I'm exaggerating? Think your CrossFit membership and organic diet have prepared you for anything? Let me walk you through your first, and likely last, day in the Middle Ages, hour by hour, breath by breath, until there are no more breaths left. Because medieval times weren't just hard. They were specifically designed by God, nature, and human stupidity to kill you in the most creative ways possible. Hour 1. The wake-up call from hell. It's dawn. Not because you set an alarm, but because some maniac with a church bell decided 4 a.m. was the perfect time to remind everyone that God exists and apparently never sleeps. The sound isn't just loud, it's physically painful, echoing off stone walls and wooden buildings like a medieval air raid siren. You're not waking up in a bed, you're waking up on a straw mattress that's basically a crime scene of mites, lice, fleas, and things that shouldn't exist in a world with a loving God. The sheets are rough wool that feels like sandpaper had a baby with a cheese grater and decided to make you suffer. Your first breath? Pure medieval ambiance. That's the smell of human waste from the communal latrines, rotting food from last week's feast, wood smoke from fires that never fully burn clean, and your neighbor's infected tooth, all mixed together in a cocktail that would make a garbage truck smell like roses by comparison. But here's where it gets fun. You need to pee. Good luck with that. Your options are either a communal pit that's basically a biological weapon masquerading as a toilet, or just wherever. Medieval people weren't picky about these things. Privacy was a luxury nobody had invented yet, and shame was for people who had time to worry about things other than survival. The communal latrine is a wooden plank with holes over a pit that hasn't been cleaned since the Norman conquest. It's shared by everyone in your area. Men, women, children, and the occasional pig who wandered in looking for breakfast. The smell alone could kill a horse. You're already wondering how you're going to survive the next 23 hours. Your modern sensibilities are in complete shock. Your nose is burning, your eyes are watering, and you haven't even gotten out of bed yet. Hour 2 to 3. Breakfast of champions, if champions were starving. Time for breakfast. Hope you like bread. Not the good stuff from your local bakery. I'm talking about bread that's basically edible cardboard mixed with sawdust, ground bones, and whatever the baker could find that wasn't completely rotten. The texture is somewhere between concrete and disappointment. This isn't Wonder Bread. This is suffer bread. It's made from grain that's been stored in barrels with rats, mixed with water that's questionable at best, and baked in ovens that double as crematoriums for the occasional mouse. Your morning beverage? Water that's been sitting in a well next to a graveyard, where the groundwater has been mingling with corpses for decades. Or if you're lucky, ale that's weaker than your will to live but still stronger than the water's ability to not kill you instantly. Here's a fun fact. Medieval people drank alcohol with every meal because it was literally safer than water. They weren't party animals. They were just trying not to die of dysentery before noon. Beer was basically liquid survival, and even children drank it because the alternative was death. You reach for what looks like cheese. It's not. It's something that used to be milk before it had a nervous breakdown and decided to become a solid. The taste? Imagine if regret had a flavor and then fermented in a basement for 3 months. It's simultaneously sour, bitter, and somehow angry. The meat, if you can call it that, looks like it died of natural causes several days ago. It's been preserved with salt that's more dirt than sodium, and it has the texture of leather that's been left in the rain. You're not sure what animal it came from, but you're pretty sure it's not from this century. 3 hours in, and you're already malnourished, dehydrated, and questioning every life choice that led you to this moment. Your stomach is cramping from the combination of rotten food and pure terror. Your head is pounding from dehydration and the constant assault on your senses. Welcome to medieval morning routine. This is the good part of your day. Hour 4 to 6. Work yourself to death. Literally. Time to earn your keep. Unless you're nobility, which you're not, because 99% of people weren't, you're about to discover what real work looks like. And by real work, I mean legalized torture with a paycheck. If you're a peasant, congratulations. You get to spend the next 12 hours bent over in a field using tools that were cutting-edge technology in the year 800. Your farming implements are basically sharpened sticks and rusty metal attached to wooden handles that splinter into your hands. The work is backbreaking, literally. You're hunched over, pulling weeds, harvesting grain, or plowing fields with oxen that are smarter than half the people you work with. Your back will break, your hands will bleed, and the sun will cook you like a medieval rotisserie chicken. But wait, there's more. The field you're working in is also the same field where animals graze, defecate, and occasionally die. You're basically farming in a giant toilet. Every step risks stepping in something that will ruin your day and possibly your life. Craftsmen, hope you enjoy repetitive motion injuries and toxic fumes. Blacksmiths didn't just work with fire, they breathed it. Every day, for years, until their lungs gave out. Tanners didn't just work with leather, they worked with chemicals that would make modern safety inspectors weep and quit their jobs. The tanning process involved soaking hides in dog feces, human urine, and various plant materials that produced fumes so toxic that tanners had their own special section of town, downwind from everyone else. You could smell a tanner from a mile away, and not in a good way. Your medieval boss doesn't care about your comfort, your health, or your basic human dignity. You work until you drop, and if you drop, someone else takes your place. It's not personal, it's just medieval economics. People were expendable. Tools were valuable. Oh, and lunch break, that's not a thing. You eat when the work is done, and the work is never done. You get a few minutes to choke down some bread and water, then it's back to slowly destroying your body for someone else's profit. By hour 6, your soft modern hands are hamburger meat. Your back feels like it's been hit by a truck full of medieval torture devices. You're beginning to understand why medieval people had an average lifespan of not very long, and why their skeletons show signs of arthritis by age 25. Hour 7 to 9. The medical emergency. Something's wrong. Maybe it's the water. Maybe it's the food. Maybe it's the fact that you've been breathing in sewage fumes and wood smoke for the past 7 hours. Maybe it's just existing in a world where hygiene is a foreign concept and soap is a luxury for the wealthy. You're feeling dizzy, nauseous, and there's a weird rash spreading up your arm that looks like it has its own ecosystem. Your stomach is making sounds that violate the laws of physics, and you're pretty sure something is moving under your skin. Time to see the doctor. Just kidding. The doctor is either a barber who also performs surgery with the same tools he uses to cut hair, a monk who thinks prayer is medicine and demons cause disease, or a woman who knows which plants won't kill you immediately. Emphasis on immediately. Your treatment options are limited but creative. Feeling feverish? Time for bloodletting. They'll slice you open with a rusty knife and drain the bad blood until you're too weak to complain. The theory is that your body has too much blood, and less blood equals less sickness. The reality is that you're now anemic on top of everything else. Headache, trepanation. They'll drill a hole in your skull with a hand-cranked drill to let the evil spirits out. No anesthesia, no sterile equipment, just a hole in your head and a prayer that you don't die screaming. Broken bone? Here's a stick to bite on while they set it wrong. They'll wrap it in whatever cloth they can find, probably not clean, and hope for the best. If you're lucky, you'll only be crippled for life. If you're unlucky, gangrene will set in and they'll amputate with a rusty saw. The good news is that medieval medicine was natural and organic. The bad news is that natural often meant naturally fatal. They had no understanding of germs, infection, or basic anatomy. Surgery was performed by people who thought the heart was just a blood pump and the brain was for cooling the blood. Most medical treatments were basically elaborate ways to die faster. You came in with a stomachache and left with sepsis, if you left at all. The leading cause of death from medical treatment was the medical treatment itself. But hey, at least they tried. Sort of. Hour 10 to 12, social interactions, aka survival of the fittest. Time to meet your neighbors. They're not what you'd call friendly. They're what you'd call desperate people fighting over scraps while slowly starving to death. Medieval society was basically a pyramid scheme where everyone was trying to avoid being at the bottom, and the bottom was a very crowded place. Your neighbors would sell you out for a moldy turnip if it meant their family might survive another day. Trust was a luxury nobody could afford. Political correctness? Not invented yet. People expressed their opinions with clubs, knives, and creative insults that would make a sailor blush and a pirate quit his job. Disagreements were settled through trial by combat, which was exactly as fun as it sounds, if you enjoy watching people die over property disputes. Women had roughly the same legal rights as livestock. They could be bought, sold, traded, and owned by men. Children were basically tiny adults who worked until they died or grew up enough to have their own tiny adults who would also work until they died. Everyone was constantly angry because they were hungry, tired, and covered in their own filth. Personal hygiene was an abstract concept. Most people bathed once a year, if they were lucky. Deodorant wouldn't be invented for another 600 years, and everyone smelled like they'd been dead for a week. Your modern sensibilities about personal space, civil discourse, and basic human decency would make you a target. You'd either be robbed, beaten, or conscripted into someone's private army to go fight other people's private armies over who gets to own the pile of rocks that used to be a castle. Social media drama has nothing on medieval village politics. These people turned gossip into a blood sport. Rumors could literally get you killed. Being accused of witchcraft was basically a death sentence, and the evidence required was, someone said you looked at them funny. Public shaming was an art form. They had stocks, pillories, and creative punishments that were designed to humiliate you before they killed you. Being tarred and feathered was considered a light sentence. Hour 13 to 15. Whether or not you'll survive. It's getting cold, or hot, or wet. Doesn't matter which, you're screwed either way because medieval people had basically declared war on weather and were losing badly. Medieval clothing was basically decorative hypothermia. Your outfit consists of rough wool that's either too heavy or too thin, leather that's harder than cardboard and twice as uncomfortable, and shoes that are more like suggestions than actual footwear. The wool isn't the soft stuff you're used to. It's scratchy, smells like the sheep it came from, and retains moisture like a sponge. It's also the only thing standing between you and death by exposure, so you'd better get used to it. Cold weather, your fingers turn blue, your toes go numb, and you huddle around fires that fill your lungs with smoke and your eyes with tears. Frostbite is a real possibility, and losing fingers and toes to the cold is so common that it's barely worth mentioning. Hot weather? You cook inside your wool prison while developing heat rashes that would make a medieval plague doctor concerned. You can't take the wool off because then you'd be naked, and being naked was both illegal and a guaranteed way to die of exposure at night. Rain? Your clothes don't dry. They just get progressively wetter and heavier until you're basically wearing a swamp. Your waterproof shelter has holes that turn every rainstorm into an indoor swimming pool. Everything you own is perpetually damp, and damp things breed mold, mildew, and diseases that don't have names yet. Snow? You're one blizzard away from becoming a medieval popsicle. No central heating, no insulation, no backup plan except pray the fire doesn't go out and hope we don't run out of wood. People regularly froze to death in their own homes. Medieval people didn't adapt to weather. They just suffered through it and hoped spring would come before they died. Winter was basically a season-long death sentence for anyone who wasn't wealthy enough to afford proper heating and food storage. The wealthy had slightly better options, but even they lived in stone castles that were basically fancy ice boxes. They had fireplaces, but fireplaces in medieval castles were about as effective as trying to heat a parking garage with a cigarette lighter. Hour 16 to 18, dinner and a show. The show is violence. Dinner time. Same menu as breakfast, but now everything's had an extra day to ferment in the medieval heat. The bread is harder, the cheese is more suspicious, and the meat has developed its own personality. You're dining by candlelight, which sounds romantic until you realize the candles are made from animal fat and smell like a rendering plant having a bad day. The ambiance is really more death vigil than cozy dinner. The dining room is whatever space isn't being used for something else. You're eating off wooden plates that have never been properly cleaned, with utensils that are shared among everyone at the table. Forks haven't been invented yet, so you're using your hands, a knife, and whatever praying mantis skills you've developed. Entertainment. Hope you like watching people hit each other with sticks. Medieval fun was basically organized violence with betting. Public executions were the Super Bowl of medieval entertainment. Hangings drew crowds like a modern concert, and everyone brought the kids. Beheadings were considered premium entertainment. The crowd would cheer, place bets on how many swings it would take, and collect souvenirs from the blood-soaked ground. It was family fun for the whole psychotic family. Storytelling was popular, but the stories were all about people dying horrible deaths, going to hell, or both. Comedy was mostly about bodily functions and peasants getting beaten by their lords. The humor was darker than a medieval dungeon and twice as depressing. Music existed, but it was performed by people who hadn't bathed in months, using instruments that sounded like dying animals. The lute was basically a medieval guitar that had given up on life. Singers performed ballads about love, death, and the love of death. Dancing was an option, but mostly it was just peasants stumbling around after drinking questionable alcohol. The dances were simple because complex choreography was hard when you were malnourished and partially drunk on beer that was stronger than modern wine. Your entertainment options were watch violence, participate in violence, or go to bed and hope tomorrow's violence would be more interesting. Hour 19 to 21. The nighttime terrors. The sun is setting, and that's when the real fun begins. Medieval nights weren't peaceful. They were hunting season, and you were the prey. Everything that wanted to kill you during the day was still there, but now it had brought friends. Bandits, wolves, and things that go bump in the night all came out after dark. Your security system was a wooden door with a latch that wouldn't stop a determined squirrel, let alone a determined human with a knife and nothing to lose. The darkness was absolute. No streetlights, no flashlights, no way to see what was trying to kill you until it was too late. Every shadow could be your last. Every sound could be your death sentence. The night was full of things that wanted to eat you, rob you, or just kill you for fun. Your neighbors weren't sleeping peacefully. They were lying awake, listening to the same terrifying sounds you were, and probably planning to rob you if the wolves didn't get you first. Trust was a luxury nobody could afford, especially at night. Medieval nights were when people died. Not from old age or disease, from the things that came out when the sun went down. Bandits preferred night raids because darkness was their ally. Wild animals hunted at night because that's when humans were most vulnerable. You're starting to understand why medieval people went to bed with the sun. It wasn't about being healthy, it was about staying alive. The night was for dying, and the smart ones tried to sleep through it. But sleep wasn't easy. Your straw mattress was full of things that bit, your wool blanket was itchy and damp, and every sound outside could be your last. The wind through the trees sounded like screaming, the creaking of wood sounded like footsteps, your own heartbeat sounded like a dinner bell for predators, and then there were the actual supernatural threats. Medieval people believed in ghosts, demons, and monsters because they lived in a world where the line between reality and nightmare was paper thin. When people died violently every day, it was easy to believe that some of them might stick around to cause, trouble. Hour 22 to 24. The final countdown. You've somehow survived 22 hours. Congratulations. You're now experienced enough to realize how completely doomed you are. You've learned what medieval life is really like, and the lesson is, it's worse than you thought. Your body is breaking down. Your immune system is fighting battles it's never seen before against diseases that won't have names for another 400 years. Your skin is developing rashes that have their own rashes. You're malnourished, dehydrated, and probably infected with something that won't be curable until the invention of antibiotics. Your hands are torn and bleeding from work and rough surfaces. Your back is screaming from the constant physical labor. Your feet are raw from walking on cobblestones and dirt paths in shoes that are basically leather suggestions. Your stomach is in open rebellion against the food you've been forcing down. Your throat is raw from breathing smoke and trying not to vomit. Your eyes are burning from the constant assault of smoke, dust, and the general medieval atmosphere. But here's the real kicker. This was just Tuesday, a normal, boring Tuesday. You'd have to do this exact same thing tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until you died, which, statistically, would be pretty soon. Medieval life wasn't just hard, it was specifically designed to kill you. The food was poisonous, the water was deadly, the work was backbreaking, and the people were desperate. Everything was trying to end you, and most of it was succeeding. You're lying on your straw bed, covered in bites from insects that don't exist anymore, nursing injuries that will never properly heal, and listening to the sounds of other people dying just outside your door. This is victory. This is what surviving a day in medieval times looks like. And tomorrow? You get to do it all over again, and again, and again, until you don't. The average medieval person lived to be about 35, and that was if they were lucky. Most died younger. Many died as children. Some died as infants. The lucky ones died in their sleep. The unlucky ones died screaming. You're realizing that medieval times weren't just a different era. They were a different species of human experience. These people lived in a world where death was a constant companion, where pain was a daily reality, and where hope was a luxury few could afford. So how did you enjoy this journey? I'm sure you wouldn't last 24 hours in medieval times. Not because you're weak, but because medieval times were specifically designed to kill everyone who wasn't incredibly tough, incredibly lucky, or incredibly dead. We like to romanticize the Middle Ages, knights and castles, kings and queens, honor and chivalry. But the reality was mud, disease, violence, and death. Lots and lots of death. The knights were barely literate thugs in armor. The castles were cold, damp, and smelly. The kings were murderers with crowns. The queens were political prisoners in fancy dresses. Your biggest complaint today might be slow internet or expensive coffee. Medieval people's biggest complaint was, I hope I don't die of dysentery before lunch. Your worst day is probably better than their best day. We're living in the most comfortable time in human history. We've got medicine that actually works, food that won't kill us, and water that's safe to drink. We've got heat in winter, cooling in summer, and entertainment that doesn't involve watching people get executed. Medieval people would think we're living like gods. And honestly, they'd be right. We have access to more information in our phones than the greatest medieval scholars had in their entire lives. We can cure diseases that killed millions of them. We can travel faster than they could imagine. We complain about traffic, but we're not walking everywhere on roads that are basically muddy death traps. We complain about processed food, but we're not eating bread made with sawdust and rat droppings. We complain about our jobs, but we're not working 16-hour days in conditions that would make modern safety inspectors quit and become monks. The next time you're frustrated with modern life, remember, you're not tough enough for medieval times. None of us are, and that's probably the best thing that ever happened to humanity. The Middle Ages were called dark for a reason, and it wasn't just because they didn't have electricity. It was because they were 1,000 years of human misery punctuated by brief moments of slightly less misery. Medieval people dreamed of a better world. We're living in it. They would trade everything they had for one day of your life. They would consider you blessed beyond measure. They would worship you as a god. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go appreciate my indoor plumbing and remember that I live in an age where survival means remembering to charge my phone and not accidentally buying milk that expires tomorrow. Medieval times were brutal, but hey, at least now you know exactly how brutal, and more importantly, you know exactly how good you have it. Sweet dreams, in your comfortable bed, with your clean sheets, and your reasonable expectation of waking up tomorrow. Medieval people would kill for that luxury, literally.